Imagine you're standing in your kitchen right now. It's a Tuesday night, and you've just dropped a piece of bread into the toaster. You might be checking your phone or thinking about the work you have to finish before bed. You aren't thinking about the toaster. You certainly aren't thinking about the chemical transformation happening inside that little appliance. You're just waiting for the toast to pop up so you can smear some butter on it and get on with your life. It is the most mundane, ordinary act imaginable. But as you stand there, smell the darkening crust, and feel the warmth radiating from the coils, you are actually engaging in a behavior that is completely impossible for every other species on the planet. You are performing a ritual that is so strange, so biologically demanding, and so ancient that it literally rewrote the blueprint of your body. If you were any other animal, from a lion to a chimpanzee, you would never do this. You would eat that grain raw, or more likely, you wouldn't be able to eat it at all. Yet here you are, a primate who cannot survive without a machine that heats its food. This is the central mystery of the human story. We are the only animals that cook, and we are the only animals that have to. We treat cooking like a hobby or a chore, but in reality, it is a biological trap we stepped into nearly 2 million years ago. We are looking for a culprit, a specific moment in time when a clever ancestor looked at a fire and didn't see a threat, but a kitchen. Pleasure is a fine motivator, but evolution doesn't care about your hobbies. The first lead in our investigation is the most obvious one: taste. We cook because it tastes better, right? When you sear a steak or roast a carrot, you're triggering the Maillard reaction. This chemical process, first described by French chemist Louis Camille Maillard in 1912, happens when amino acids and reducing sugars are heated together. It creates hundreds of different flavor compounds that don't exist in the raw version of the food. It's why bread smells better than flour and why a grilled burger smells better than a pile of raw ground beef. We have evolved a powerful sensory preference for these flavors. But as any detective will tell you, a motive isn't the same thing as a cause. Just because we like the way cooked food tastes doesn't explain why our entire biology shifted to depend on it. In the wild, animals don't develop massive, species-wide technological dependencies just because something feels good. Evolution is a ruthless accountant of calories and energy. If cooking were just about flavor, we would have remained like every other primate, capable of eating raw food but occasionally enjoying a charred treat. Instead, we lost the ability to go back. If you tried to live like a wild chimpanzee tomorrow, eating only the raw fruits, roots, and insects they eat, you would run into a catastrophic problem almost immediately. You physically could not chew fast enough to stay alive. The problem is that meat alone was an incomplete solution. For a long time, the leading theory in human evolution was that meat eating was the primary driver of our development. This was the man-the-hunter hypothesis, popularized in the 1960s by anthropologists like Richard Lee and Irvin DeVore. The idea was simple: our ancestors started hunting, meat provided a dense source of calories, and those calories fueled our growing brains. It's a clean story, but it has a massive hole in it. Raw meat is notoriously difficult for humans to process. If you've ever tried to eat a raw, unaged steak, you know it's like chewing on a rubber tire. Our teeth aren't designed to shear through raw muscle and sinew. More importantly, eating raw meat in the wild is a gamble with your life. It's a breeding ground for parasites and bacteria like E. coli and Salmonella. While other carnivores have highly acidic stomachs and specialized immune systems to handle these pathogens, we do not. But even if you could stomach the raw meat, there's a more pressing issue: the caloric math. In 1999, researcher Karina Kobnik conducted the Gießen raw food study in Germany. She followed over 500 people who ate a diet consisting of at least 70% raw food. Despite having access to high-quality modern produce and blenders to process their food, nearly a third of the women in the study stopped menstruating entirely. Their bodies were effectively shutting down their reproductive systems because they weren't getting enough net energy. They were losing weight even when they ate until they were full. If modern humans with blenders and supermarkets can't thrive on raw food, our ancestors on the savannah certainly couldn't have done it by just adding a bit of raw meat to their diet. Our ancestors were literally shrinking while their minds were exploding. To find the real turning point, we have to look at the crime scene left behind in the fossil record. About 1.9 million years ago, a new character appeared on the scene, Homo erectus. When you look at the skeleton of a Homo erectus compared to its predecessors, like Australopithecus, the changes are jarring. First, their brains were significantly larger, jumping from about 450 cubic centimeters to nearly 1,000. Second, their bodies were taller and more athletic. But the third change is the most revealing for our investigation. Their mouths and guts were shrinking. Homo erectus had smaller jaws, smaller teeth, and a much narrower ribcage. In the world of biology, a narrow ribcage is a signal for a smaller digestive tract. This is a massive evolutionary paradox. Usually, if an animal grows a bigger brain and a bigger body, it needs more food, which means it needs a bigger gut to process all that extra fuel. Instead, Homo erectus did the opposite. They grew the most energy-hungry organ in the known world, the human brain, while simultaneously downsizing the very equipment used to power it. This is like a trucking company deciding to use much larger trucks while installing significantly smaller fuel tanks. It only works if the fuel you're putting in is much more efficient than what you were using before. This anatomical shift is the smoking gun. It suggests that by 1.9 million years ago, something had already changed the way our ancestors were interacting with their food. Think of fire as an external stomach. This is where the work of Harvard anthropologist Richard Wrangham becomes essential to our case. Wrangham proposed the cooking hypothesis, which suggests that fire wasn't just a late-stage invention, but the primary catalyst for becoming human. To understand why, you have to look at what happens to food at the molecular level when it meets a flame. Most of the energy in plant foods like tubers and roots is locked away in starch granules. In their raw state, these granules are semicrystalline and incredibly hard for your digestive enzymes to break down. You can chew a raw potato all day, and you'll only extract about half of its potential calories. The rest just passes through you, wasted. But when you apply heat, the starch undergoes a process called gelatinization. The granules absorb water, swell, and burst. Suddenly, those calories are 100% accessible. The same thing happens with protein. Heat denatures the tightly coiled proteins in meat, unfolding them so your enzymes can zip through them with ease. Cooking is, quite literally, predigestion. By using a fire to break down the tough fibers and proteins outside your body, you are outsourcing the work your stomach used to do. This external stomach allowed our ancestors to get significantly more energy out of every bite while spending significantly less energy on the process of digestion itself. It was the ultimate biological hack. To gain a mind, we had to lose a gut. In 1995, anthropologists Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler published a landmark paper on what they called the expensive tissue hypothesis. Their argument was that the human body has a strictly limited energy budget. Both the brain and the digestive system are incredibly expensive to maintain in terms of calories. In most primates, the gut is the dominant energy consumer. It's a massive, complex factory that has to run 24/7 to ferment raw leaves and fibrous fruits. Because the gut is so expensive, there isn't enough energy left over to power a large brain. You can have a big gut or a big brain, but you can't have both. By starting to cook, Homo erectus broke this stalemate. Because cooked food was so easy to digest, they no longer needed a massive, energy-hogging digestive tract. Natural selection began to shrink the gut. That diverted energy, now suddenly available in the body's budget, was redirected to the cranium. Our brains didn't grow because we became smarter. Our brains grew because we started processing our food with fire. We traded our digestive power for cognitive power. This wasn't a choice, it was a metabolic pivot. Once the gut shrank and the brain grew, there was no going back. We were now locked into a technological partnership with fire. If the fire went out, the species would starve. We had become the first obligate decoctivores, creatures that must cook to survive. But where was the physical evidence for this timeline? Every mystery needs a timeline, and for a long time, the archaeology didn't seem to match the biology. If Homo erectus was cooking 1.9 million years ago, where are the ancient kitchens? For decades, the oldest confirmed hearths were only a few 100,000 years old. This gap led many scientists to doubt Wrangham's theory. They argued that fire was a much later invention and that meat eating alone was enough to drive early brain growth. But recent discoveries are starting to close that gap. In the Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, researchers have found microscopic traces of wood ash and burned bone fragments buried in layers that are at least 1 million years old. Because these traces are deep inside a cave, they couldn't have been caused by a random lightning strike or a forest fire. Someone brought that fire inside. Even more compelling is the site at Gesher Benat Yaakov in Israel. In 2022, a team led by Nira Alpersonafil published a study of fish remains found at the site, dating back 780,000 years. By analyzing the crystal structure of the tooth enamel on these fish, they could prove the fish had been exposed to temperatures consistent with cooking, but not so high that they were just tossed into a brush fire. It was controlled, low-intensity heat. The missing million years of evidence might simply be a result of how fire works. A small campfire on a windy savanna 1.5 million years ago doesn't leave a permanent footprint. It's a miracle we've found anything at all. The evidence we do have suggests that fire use was a skill being honed and passed down for a much longer period than we previously imagined. The fire did more than just soften the food. Once the how and why of cooking are established, the investigation turns to the secondary effects, the unintended consequences that shaped our society. Cooking didn't just change our bodies, it changed our schedules. A chimpanzee spends about 6 hours of every day just chewing. If you've ever tried to eat a massive bowl of raw kale, you know the feeling. Your jaw gets tired, and you have to focus entirely on the task at hand. By switching to cooked food, humans reduced their chewing time to about 1 hour per day. Suddenly, our ancestors had 5 extra hours of free time every single day. That is an astronomical amount of time in an evolutionary sense. What do you do with 5 hours of extra time when you aren't worried about starving? You make better tools. You socialized. You tell stories. This leads to the most fascinating social clue in our mystery, the hearth. Unlike raw food, which can be eaten on the go, cooked food requires a destination. You have to bring the food back to the fire. You have to wait for it to cook. This created the first home base. It forced people to sit together in a circle, facing each other, waiting for a shared resource. It created a need for patience, for sharing, and for communication. Many linguists and anthropologists believe that the social structure of the campfire was the crucible in which human language was forged. We didn't just cook our food, we cooked our culture. The kitchen created the family. This gathering around the fire also likely changed the way we interact as a species. In most primate groups, food is a source of intense competition. If a chimpanzee finds a pile of fruit, he eats as much as he can as fast as he can before someone else takes it. But cooking requires a division of labor. Someone has to gather the wood. Someone has to maintain the fire. Someone has to hunt or gather the raw ingredients. This encouraged a level of cooperation that is rare in the animal kingdom. It also created a new kind of vulnerability. A fire is a beacon. It tells every predator for miles exactly where you are. To sit around a fire at night, you need to trust that someone is watching your back. This heightened the need for group cohesion and may have played a role in the development of human pair bonding. By creating a shared meal, we created a shared future. The fire kept the predators away, kept us warm, and gave us the energy to dream about the next day. The mystery of the cooked meal isn't just about nutrition, it's about the moment we stopped being just another animal and started becoming a community. We have reached the verdict of our investigation. The reason ancient humans began cooking wasn't because they were geniuses who foresaw the future of civilization. It likely started as an accident, a piece of fruit or a carcass dropped into a natural fire and scavenged later. But that accident revealed a biological shortcut so powerful that it became an evolutionary mandate. We are the products of a 2-million-year-old feedback loop. Fire allowed us to eat better, which allowed us to grow bigger brains, which allowed us to control fire more effectively, which allowed us to eat even better. We didn't invent cooking, cooking invented us. We are the cooking ape, a species that traded its physical strength and its digestive independence for a heavy, dreaming brain and a life built around a hearth. Think back to that toaster in your kitchen. It seems like a simple convenience, a way to make your breakfast a little crispier. but it's actually a life support system. You are part of a lineage that made a one-way trade with the elements nearly 2 million years ago. We have spent so long outsourcing our digestion to the flame that our bodies have literally forgotten how to do the work themselves. Your jaw is too weak to sustain you on a wild diet. Your stomach is too small to process the volume of raw plants you would need to survive. Your gut lacks the fermenting power to unlock the calories of the natural world. If you were stripped of your technology, your stoves, your lighters, your toasters, you would not just be inconvenienced. You would be a biological failure. You are the only creature on this planet that can be surrounded by a lush forest of edible plants and a teeming landscape of prey, and still starve to death simply because you cannot find a way to make them hot. You don't own your technology owns your biology. You are a domestic animal, and fire is your master. What's even more haunting is how much of your daily life is still dictated by this ancient arrangement. Every time you feel the urge to sit down with friends for dinner, every time you find the smell of a barbecue irresistible, and every time you feel that deep sense of safety when you're home in the kitchen, you are hearing the echoes of a Homo erectus ancestor who took a chance on a burning branch. We like to think of ourselves as the masters of the earth, the architects of cities and the conquerors of space. But at our core, we are still just the primates who escaped the endless cycle of chewing. We paid for our intelligence with our stomachs, and we paid for our culture with our independence. We are a species of specialists, and our specialty is heat. Without it, the human part of you would vanish in a matter of weeks, leaving behind a body that was never designed to stand alone. The next time you pull a warm meal out of the oven, look at it closely. You aren't just looking at dinner. You're looking at the reason you have the cognitive ability to even think these thoughts. You're looking at the fuel that built the pyramids, wrote the symphonies, and split the atom. It's a remarkable legacy, but it comes with a cold, undeniable reality. You are a biological prisoner of the flame. Every other animal on Earth is free to wander the world and eat what they find. You, however, are tethered to the hearth. You are part of a species that took a shortcut to greatness, and now you have to keep the fire burning forever just to stay in the race. It's a heavy price to pay for a bigger brain, but standing there in the warmth of your kitchen, you'd probably agree it was a fair trade. What do you think is the most significant thing we gained from this transition? Was it the brain power, the extra time, or the social bonds of the campfire? The history of cooking is the history of us, and there is still so much we don't know about those first few centuries around the flame. If you found this deep dive into our evolutionary kitchen fascinating, consider subscribing to join us for the next investigation. We're constantly digging into the mysteries that make us human, from the origins of language to the secrets of our ancient ancestors. There's a lot more to uncover, and the fire is just getting started. But before you go, consider one final truth that most people never realize. Your body is a map of every meal your ancestors ever cooked. The shape of your face, the length of your intestines, and the very way your cells process energy are all direct results of a prehistoric technology. You are not just using fire, you are made of it. And in a world that is increasingly disconnected from the natural origins of our food, it's worth remembering that you are only here because someone, 1,000,000 years ago, decided to change the rules of the game. They looked at a piece of raw meat, looked at a flame, and saw a possibility that changed the universe. We are the survivors of that choice. We are the descendants of the first chefs. And as long as we keep cooking, we keep being human. But if the fires ever truly went out, we would find out very quickly just how much we've lost. Without the ability to pre-digest our world, we would be reduced to a group of slow, hungry primates with brains far too big for our stomachs to support. We would be a biological impossible, a mind without a battery. It's a chilling thought to have while you're just trying to make some toast, but that's the reality of our species. We are a high-performance engine that requires high-performance fuel, and we haven't been able to make that fuel ourselves for a very long time. Take a moment to appreciate the heat. Whether it's the steam rising from a coffee cup or the sizzle of a pan, it's the sound of your survival. It's the smell of your history. It's the only reason you're here to hear these words. We didn't just start cooking because it was better. We started cooking because it was the only way to become who we are. And once we started, there was no turning back. The case of the cooking ape is closed, But the consequences of the verdict are something we live with every single second of our lives. You are a biological dependent of a technology you didn't even invent, and your survival is entirely reliant on a chemical reaction that happened 2 million years ago. Without that fire, your brain would literally starve itself to death inside your own skull.